In our previous topics, we discussed how to create the reports. So we have created the simple report and discussed the disadvantages or limitations of the simple report. Let me go to that screen. So the limitations of the simple report. You cannot share the report with others. Simple reports. And by default you are the report owner, and if you cannot share with the others, what is the use? You can use it only for your purpose. Others cannot access. And you can add only simple filters. You cannot add advanced filter conditions. If you have, let's say you have 4 or 5 conditions which you want to test, and you need or conditions or and conditions and parentheses, so such complex filters cannot be added to a simple report, and cannot publish as a web service. If you want to call any report from an integration, that should be enabled as a web service. If you ask me why we have to, that discussion we will have later. But remember, if you want to call any report from an integration, custom report from an integration, that should be enabled as a web service. But you cannot enable simple report as a web service. And another one is no related business object field. You cannot include the fields from the related business object. Example, in my report I'm creating a report which display the list of workers first name, last name, email id. Along with that, I want to display the workers dependents first name, last name and their contact number. I cannot do it in a simple report because workers dependents first name, last name and their contact number, those details are stored in dependents business object, but we are creating the report on the workers business object, so you cannot get the data from the related business object. Whereas we can overcome all these limitations in advanced report. You can share the report with others. We are going to see how to do that. You can write the advanced or complex filter conditions. You can add the prompts also. When you are writing the filters, you can add the prompts, and you can enable this as a web service. So you can call the advanced report from an integration, and you can access the fields from the related business objects. And you can also add the filters on the related business object instances. In advanced report you can include the fields from the related business object. So as you can include the data from the RPO, there will be an option or availability to add the filter to that RPO objects. Example, I want to display the worker details along with the I want to display worker details and worker dependence details. And which dependence details? I want to display only child dependents, not the other dependents. Or I want to display only spouse dependent details. How can I filter the spouse from the other dependents? Using sub-level filtering or filtering on the related business object. So today we are going to discuss how to do all this in advanced report. So first let me search for the existing report. The prefix to search for a report is RD, stands for report definition colon. So here this is our advanced report. We have included the fields from worker business object here, and followed by we have included the fields from dependent business object. So we are able to include the data from primary business object and related business object. Next, go to the sort tab. If you want to sort any records, if you want to sort the primary business object records, you will add a sort direction here. So here this is the sort, means you can sort the records or instances of the primary business object. and I want to sort the workers based on their hire date descending order. So I have defined this. Let me edit this report. Let me go to sort. So here I want to sort the worker records based on the hire date in descending order. So I have mentioned these details. Now all the worker records will be sorted based on hire date descending order. And if you go to the columns, here we have the data from the worker business object and dependents also. If the worker have more than one dependent, those dependent, each dependent first name, last name, relationship and age will be displayed in the report. Now what I want to do is, I want to sort the worker records based on the hire date descending order. So I have mentioned this, and the workers dependents, I want to sort those dependents records based on their age. I want to sort the dependents records RBO instances based on the age. You can define that sorting at sub-level sort. In this section, you will mention how you would like to sort the instances of the RBO related business object. So click on add, and here it is asking for business object. In the main sort, it is not asking the business object, but when I try to add a sub-level sort, it is asking for business object. What could be the reason?
The subsort might be in the field is in different business object. So you can add here and you can put the different business object field here to sort out.
All right. Okay. The reason is, yeah, please be unmute. The reason is, if you take a report, the report can have only one primary business object. The report can have only one primary business object. So whatever you mentioned here, this will be applicable to the primary business object, instances of the primary business object. But you can include more than one RBO in your report. Here dependents, if I want to include supervisory organization details, I can include that. Supervisory organization. So now the report is including the data from two RBOs, dependents and supervisory organization. In this case, my requirement is I want to sort the dependents record based on the age, supervisory organization details based on the code, some organization code or some other organization's revenue or something else. How can I mention that? Using this business object. It allows you to select which RBO to which RBO this sort will apply or applicable. Okay, so I'm going to use only one dependent. Let me delete the supervisor organization. Later, when I explain the calculated field, I will add one more. We will discuss more about that time. Now let me select dependents. Currently our report has one RBO, that is dependent, and here I am mentioning that I want to sort the dependents record based on their age and ascending order. If you have another RBO in the report and if you want to sort those records, you can mention that. You will select the business object here and the sort direction. Okay, this is how we add the sort. Next, filter condition. So we already discussed this filter condition. So
Issuer In sort,
Mm-hmm.
we added three. For example, we added two, right now.
Mm-hmm.
So which one is preceding actually? So first it will started by hire date and then it will start by age.
Good question. I was expecting this. See, first, this sort is applicable for which business object? Worker, right? So, what it will is when you run the report, let me try to run this. When you run the report, what happens is all the worker records, all the worker records will be sorted based on their hire date. All the worker records will be sorted based on the hire date in descending order. And then for each worker, if the worker have more than one dependent, those dependent records will be sorted based on the age. It will not, this sub-level sort will not impact the order of the primary business object instances. It will just change the sort direction, sort order of the related business object instances.
Okay.
Okay, so one second. I'm just trying to navigate to worker who has the dependents. Hmm. Okay, if you see here, if you take the worker records, see all these worker records are sorted based on the hire date, based on the hire date descending order. Here you can find this. And this worker has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dependents. So at that time, what it will do is the report will sort only the dependent record of this worker based on the age. Clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So here, yeah, please be unmute. So this is how the sort will apply or change the direction of the output. Now I'm going to change my requirement. So if you see here, the worker has more than
Yeah,
one.
yeah, Ishwar,
Mhm,
just one question.
mhm,
So, if employee doesn't have the more than one record dependent information detail,
mm.
so in that case, it is not going to be sorted, right? In the alphabetical order ascending.
All right. If the worker doesn't have any dependents, so it will ignore the sort direction.
Yeah, okay. Because main object only main object only it will sort it first.
Ah, yes.
Later, if it has, then it will go to the sub object.
Right. See, thing is sub-level sort, that sub-level RBO sort that we apply on the RBO, it just sort the RBO instances. It's nowhere it will impact the primary business object instances. Take two, let's say take two workers.
Okay,
Okay, two
okay,
workers hire date is same. Hire date is January 1st and February 1st. So what happens is the worker whose hire date is February 1st will be displayed, and then worker whose hire date is January 1st will be displayed. Okay, then what it will do is for each worker who is hired on February 1st, it will go to the dependent records. If the worker have more than one dependent, and then it will sort those two dependent records. Again, then it will go to the next record, next hire, whose hire date is January 1st. So if the worker have more than one dependent, it will sort that worker's dependent records. It will not impact the another worker's dependent record, or it will not impact the main worker records. Is that clear or still
okay.
any
Yes, yes. Thank you. Yeah,
confusion?
clear. It's clear, clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this is how the sorting works. Now let's talk about the filtering. See here, this worker has 5 dependents. He has 2 child dependents. Here you can see the relation. Child dependents, one spouse, parent, and uncle. Now my requirement is I want to display only child dependents. I want to display only child dependents. not the other. So if the worker has more than one dependent, or if the worker has a dependent with a different relationship, I want to display only child dependent, not the others. This is my one requirement. And coming to the worker, I want to display the workers whose total base pay annualized amount is greater than 2 lakhs. Whose total base pay annualized amount is greater than 2 lakhs. So now let's go and edit the report. I'm going to the filter condition. If you want to add any filter, then filter to the primary business object instances you will add under filter. If you want to add any filter to the RBO, related business object instances, we will add under sub filter tab. So for sort, they have given only one section, sort and sub level sort we will define here, but for filter and sub filter they have given a separate tabs. So if you want to add any sub filtering, you will add that here. If you want to sort primary business object records, you will do it here. My requirement is just to include the worker whose total base pay annualized amount is greater than 2 lakhs. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this. I don't need all these. So greater than or equal to or greater than 2 lakhs. So now the report will display the workers whose total base pay annualized amount is greater than 2 lakhs. Yes, I'm done with the filter condition. Now sub level filter. So add here, okay, and business object dependents. Currently we have included only dependents business object in our report. So plus here you can add the filter condition. So which field is available? Which field is available? Uh, which are what can I say? Okay, which field is available to return the relationship between the worker and the dependent? We come here. Do we have any field which tells the relationship between a worker and the dependent? We have the relationship field. So I will use this field in the sub level filter, sub filter. How I write the filter condition is include the dependents who has the relationship child in the selection list, child. So the dependents who has the child relationship with the worker will be included in the output. This is the field, and in the selection list, as it's the list field, we have to select in the selection list value specified in the filter. Means whatever the value is specified here, that should be used by the filter condition. Now the report will include the dependents whose relation or who has the relationship child with the worker. If I run the report, the output will have the list of workers whose total base pay annualized amount is greater than 2 lakhs. And if the worker, means whatever the worker it will display, if those workers have dependents, it will include only child dependent details in the output. Let me save this and run. So here if you see, all these workers total base pay annualized amount is greater than 2 lakhs, and I'm searching for a worker Who has the dependents? Can you see this? Earlier for this worker, it displayed parent, uncle, spouse, etc. But if you see now, it displayed only child dependent. Child dependent. And those child dependent records are sorted based on the age. Only those child dependent records are sorted based on the age. Here you can see the worker, additional workers. Here this is how the filter and sub-filter condition works. But see, when it comes to the execution, you should know how the filter and sub-filter works. If the report has any sub-filter, first sub-filter logic will be executed. If the report has any filter and sub-filter, first sub-filter conditions will be executed and then primary filter. First remember this. So if the report has any filter and sub-filter, first sub-filter will be executed, then main filter. Why? If you ask me why, to understand this better, come back to the report output. If you see here, it is displaying the, if you see this one, for this worker it didn't display any dependence. If you see here, there is no dependence for this worker. What does that mean? Does it mean the worker don't have any dependent, or the worker doesn't have child dependent? What does that mean? Guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
What does that
Yeah.
mean?
They don't have child depend.
Mhm. They don't have child
Or
dependent.
either they don't have dependents at all.
So how do you decide?
Both the
Go ahead.
it depends. It depends on your sub filter first. It decides.
Mhm.
Then if they don't have, then it will go for is the worker have a 2 lakhs salary or not?
Right. So that means you are agreeing the sub-filter logic will work first.
Correct.
Okay. Yes. So as you said, if you please be unmute. Guys, if you don't see any dependency details, okay, let me ask in this way. So here we have three conditions, three scenarios. One is worker doesn't have any dependent. Worker doesn't have dependent, and the next one is worker doesn't have child dependent, and worker have child and other dependent. These are the three scenarios. Now, if you see here, worker doesn't have any dependents. Do you want to display or do you want to include them in the report output?
No.
Okay. So if you don't want to display worker who doesn't have any dependents, then how to write the condition? How to write the filter condition? So first of all, how can we find if the worker has dependents or not? How can we find?
So it goes to this dependence business object and checks for the is there any dependence or not
Right, but
for this worker.
See, you're talking about how the logic will be executed, but I'm searching for how to. Is there a way to find worker has dependents or not? If yes, what is the way? Which field is available? Which fields tells whether the worker has dependents or not?
It might be in worker. It might be in primary worker business object. It says dependents. Yes.
Uh-huh. So you are expecting a field in the worker business object which says whether the worker has dependents or not, right?
Correct.
Right. So that's what. If you remember, please be on. Yeah, thank you. So if you remember, during our business object terminology discussion, when after creating a simple report, when we run the report output has few text fields and few hyperlinks. And I mentioned these hyperlinks holds the references to the instances present in RBO. And at that time, we have used a dependence field. If you go to that simple report, there we have used a field called dependence. And I mentioned this dependence field. Let me go to that. So dependence. And this field, dependence field, holds the references to the data present in the dependence business object. If the worker has more than one dependent, it will display it will return those records. If the worker doesn't have any dependents, then this field will display null or empty value. Let me run the report. So here, can you see? This worker doesn't have any dependents. So it displayed the empty value. If the worker has dependents, then it will display the worker details, means the dependents details. I'm just trying to scroll further. 1 second. I think they have created a lot of test data. Here, you see this worker has the dependents, so it is returning the displaying the references to those dependents records. So now what I can do is, if I want to verify whether a worker has dependents or not, I can use this field, dependents field. What I will do is, I will go to this is advanced report. I will go to the filter condition. I will go to the filter condition, and here I will add a condition like this: dependence dependence is not empty. Dependence is not empty. If you add this one, only the workers who has the dependents will be included in the report output, and this additional condition satisfies this. We can avoid the worker who doesn't have the dependents by adding this condition. Now this one, I want to filter the worker who doesn't have child dependents. How to add that? Do we have a field? Okay, here in primary business object we have a field which returns the dependents, so we have used this one. Now when I don't want to display the worker who doesn't have the child dependents, do we have a field in worker business object which returns only child dependents?
No, actually, you put it as a subfilter as a child relationship.
Right. So in that case, the report will depend on the sub-level filter to filter the what is the RPO instances. So to achieve this, you cannot simply depend on the main filter, the report. First, it will go to the sub filter. It will go to the sub filter, and then it will check if the dependent has the relationship child with the worker. If yes, return that dependent record. If the worker, like let's say the worker has three dependents, one child, one spouse, one parent. So first it will check the spouse record, spouse dependent. The relationship is not child, so it will ignore that spouse. The next, parent dependent, the relationship is not child, so it will ignore. Next, child, yes, the relationship is child, so that child record will be returned to the primary filter. The child dependent details will be sent to the primary filter. Now the primary filter checks, okay, dependence. Now dependence means the dependence record sent by the sub filter. The dependence record sent by the sub filter. The sub filter will send only child dependent records, so it will go here. Now it will check, does the worker or does the child dependence field is empty. If yes, the worker will be ignored. Is the child dependence field value not empty, then include that worker and display that child dependent details. If the filter condition and subfilter works in another way, okay, just assume if the filter condition works first and subfilter condition works first, you cannot add such filters. Okay, so once again, if you see dependence here, that means the dependent records are written by the subfilter. The report will only consider the dependent records written by this subfilter, and it is returning only child dependents. So the report will check if the worker total base pay annualized amount is greater than 2 lakhs and the worker has child dependents. When both the conditions are satisfied, then only the worker record will be included in the output. Is that clear?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And here we are just using worker and dependents, but in real time means, so you should understand the concept. Here we are using only worker and dependents. Let's say tomorrow you are creating a report. You can take this as an assignment, guys. So what you want to do is display list of workers who are enrolled to the some benefit plan. I will provide the benefit plan details. Enroll to the some benefit plan. I have to create a report which include employee ID, first name and last name. Okay, followed by the benefits the worker enrolled. Benefits the worker currently enrolled. I want to display the worker details, but which worker? Workers who are enrolled to some given benefit plan. Let's say if I say some uh, MediAssist healthcare plan. So the workers who are enrolled to this benefit plan should be displayed. If they are not enrolled, then the worker should not be displayed. If the worker doesn't enroll to any benefit plan, even those workers should not be displayed. So you can use filter and sub filter. Think about this. At the end of this session, I will tell you the which fields can be used to do this assignment.
Yeah, Ishwar, can you show the sub filter what you added condition
Right,
in that?
yes. This one. So our
Yes,
requirement
yes, okay,
is,
okay. Yeah.
see how you think is, the requirement is it should display only child dependents. So then the next question is, how can I find if the dependent is a child to a worker? Which field is available to identify the relationship between the worker and the dependent, and search for that field. Okay, so the business object has a lot of fields. So first you should identify that, and at least try to most of the time the field names are self-explanatory. So once you get some basic idea, try to search for that. Okay, this is about filter and sub filter. Now let's talk about the prompts. If you see this, now here we have mentioned, hey, include worker whose this total base pay annualized amount is greater than 2 lakhs, and coming to the dependents, only child dependent. But the requirement is keep on changing. Now 2 lakhs, tomorrow they are asking, they may ask for 1 lakh, or another manager wants to see for 5 lakhs. And instead of the child, sometimes they want to include the spouse details or parent details or another dependent details. So whenever if you hard code the values like this, here you have hard coded the values in the filter condition and sub filter condition. If you have like this, whenever there is a change in the requirement, again you have to come here and you have to update these hard coded values. Instead, what we can do is we can add the prompts. Instead of hard coding the values, you can add the prompt. As the name indicates, prompt. When you add a prompt, what it will do is it will prompt the user for the value. Hey, do you want to run the report? Or it will ask like this, hey, workers whose total base pay annualized amount is greater than which value you want to include in the output, and dependents with which relationship you want to include in the output. The whoever going to run the report, they will provide the values and the run the report, and the report will return the values accordingly. You can do that by adding the prompt. Before adding the prompt, first you should mention that in the filter condition. Under comparison type, see, this is the field. I want to use this field in the filter condition. This is the field, this is the operator. I want to perform greater than or less than or equal to, whatever the operation you want to perform, you will mention that here. Against which value? Against which value? So before that, this comparison type mention from where it can get the value. You want to compare whether total base pay annualized amount is greater than, against which value? This value. But it says the value specified in the filter. That means whatever the value mentioned here, this will be used for the comparison. Now whenever you want to add the prompt, instead of this value, you will mention prompt the user for the value. Under comparison type, you will change that. Filter condition. So under comparison type, if you use this one value specified in this filter, it allow you to hard code the value. We have other options. Prompt the user for the value. So if we use this option, what it will do is it will prompt the user for the value. Whoever run the report, they will be prompted for the value. So here comparison tab is default prompt. You can ignore this. We're going to use the default prompts. Now dependence. Okay, now let me go to the subfilter condition. Here I want to add a prompt. So same you will use, instead of value specified in the filter, you will use prompt the user for the value, and see for the other options. Value specified in this filter, we know if you use this one, here you can hard code the values. If you use another option, prompt the user, it will add the prompt. What is this option? Can you read this? Prompt the user for the value and ignore the filter condition if the value is blank. This allows you to add an optional prompt. This will allow you to add an optional prompt. Means whenever you run the report, it will prompt for a value. The relationship field will be prompted for a value. If the user gives child, then only child dependents will be included. If the end user gives parent, only parent dependents details will be ignored. What happens if they don't give any value? What happens if they don't give any value?
It will ignore all the conditions.
It will ignore all the condition, means it will ignore this filter condition and it will include all the dependents. Okay, it's a kind of optional prompt. So value from another field, we use this option during mainly when we use calculated fields or another field. Okay, we will discuss this during the calculated field, but now just overview is we want to check if the worker, the dependent relationship is child or not. But the the child information is fetched from another field. We have another field or calculated field which returns that expected value. You cannot hard code or you cannot prompt the user. Actually the value will be calculated during runtime and you want to use that value here. In that case you will use the option value from another field. We will see this during the calculated fields session. So I'm not going to spend time on this. Let me use prompt the user for the value. And if you click on OK and if you run the report, it will prompt the user for those values. The report will automatically add the prompts. But if you want to configure the prompts, like you don't want to simply depend on the prompts that are generated by the Workday. If you want to add additional details to the prompts that you have added, you will do it under prompts tab. Currently we have added two prompts. One is here in the main filter and another one is at the sub-level filter. One for the relation, what is the total base pay annualized amount, and another one is for the relationship. So though you will configure those prompts here. Can you see this? It is asking, do you want to create a new? Ignore. Can you see the relationship total base pay annualized amount? So first I want to add this one and the next relationship here. Okay, total base pay analyzed amount is the field. Prompt qualifier is the default prompt, means we are not doing any. I will explain this later. Default prompt and label for the prompt. So whenever it prompt the user, what it will do is it will add some label to that prompt. Otherwise, let me save this. As of now, let me save this and let me try to run this. Can you see this? I have added the prompts, and when I click on OK and run the report, it is asking for that. It is asking for total base pay analyzed amount and relationship. And if you see the default value, can you see? There is no default value. And here the 0 means even here also you don't have any default value. So now I'm able to add the prompt successfully, but what I want to do is I want to make this prompt as mandatory. Users will not be allowed, or I don't want to allow the user to run the report without giving the value to this prompt. And I don't want to allow the user to run the report without giving the value to this. So how can I make this field as a required prompt? And this, okay, how can I make this prompt as a required prompts? Second, instead of just displaying this one, what I want to do is I want to display along with some default value. So like this. I want to display this prompt along with the default value. That we will do it in prompts tab. Now let me go to that tab.
Yeah, Ishwar.
Mhm.
So whatever the prompts we added in the filter tabs,
Mhm.
those should be added in the prompts tab as well, right? We have to include those
Right. See,
prompts in that
by default, earlier we have to
prompt.
in earlier versions, but these days what happens is if you mention that prompt option in the filtered, and if you don't add under prompts tab, like let's say you have selected this option, prompt the user, and after that you clicked on OK. What Workday is doing is it automatically adding the prompts under prompt tab. You don't have to add explicitly, but if you want to do some customization, means you want to mark them as required prompt, or you want to display along with some default value, if you need such functionality, yes, you have to come to the prompts tab and you have to add those options here. Okay.
So if it's added automatically in the filters
Hmm.
feature, then what is the use of having prompts when this scenario is
See,
we
thing
need to
is,
fill in the details?
first of all, in the filters tab, okay, this filter section, this section allow you to mention whether you want to prompt the user for the value or you want to hard code the value here. It just mentioned that whether you want to prompt the user or you want to hard code the value. Okay, now take the first option. I want to prompt the user. Whenever it prompts, I want, this is a mandatory prompt. Let's say workers, they don't get the expected output if they don't provide the value to this. Guys, 1 second please. I will be on mute for a second. Yes. So this, it will just allow you to mention you want to prompt the user or you want to hard code the value. But if when you want to prompt the user and that you want to make that prompt as required and you want to display along with the default value, you cannot mention those details here. You can only do it under prompts tab. And when you don't need these features, like when you don't want to mark them as required or whenever you don't want to display them as a default value, you don't have to visit this tab. After selecting this option, prompt the user, you will click on OK. Automatically Workday will add those under prompts tab. Clear? Okay, thank you. And the first, let's start with this one, label for prompt. So you might have observed whenever it displayed for the prompt, by default this field name is used at the label of the prompt. If you want to use another text as a label, let's say instead of displaying total base pay annualized amount, I want to display as salary. You can mention that here. When you mention that, whenever you run the report, the prompt will have this label salary. Instead of this, it will have the prompt label as salary. Sorry, salary as prompt label. And the next one is relationship. I want to display as it is. I know I don't want to display or use another label, so I can ignore. And the next one is default type. See, here these two options, default type and default value, help you to mention, okay, the default value. Whenever it display the prompt, what should be the default value? Here you can choose these options. Determine default value at runtime. Determine default value at runtime. This option will be used if you want to get the data at runtime. Again, a calculated field option. If you have a calculated field which returns the data, you will use this option. Guys, I will show you this option, determine default value at runtime. Okay, and even filter also we have seen, determine or get the value at runtime. I will explain this option after discussing the calculated field. Okay, remember, make a note of this. And no default value. If you select this one, the prompt will be displayed without any default value. If you want to display with some value, specify this, specify default value and mention the value here, 2 lakhs. And here also same, specify default value. I want to display the child as the default prompt value. So child, let's take a spouse also. So whenever the prompt is displayed, it will have these two options as default values. And required, these two prompts are required. Without the value, user should not be allowed to run the report. I will mention this one. Do not prompt at runtime. Again, this is related to the calculated field. Okay, and especially when you schedule the reports and when you use the calculated fields, we use this option. Yeah, again, you have to wait for some time to understand this. Do not include in subtitle, ignore that. You will see this option during EI, what is that, EIB outbound discussion. You will see something called web service URLs and all those. At that time you will see that option. Otherwise, yeah, you include this one. I will show you here also. Do not include in subtitle. At first, let me uncheck this. I will show you this later. Let me click on OK, and I'm going to run the report. Can you see this? Salary displayed with the default value. If you want to change this to some other, you can change this. Let's try to run this report without value. Can you see this? The field salary is required and must have a value. So without the value, it will not allow. And here relationship is child and spouse. So if you want to display only child, select this and click on OK.
Sure, but here 0 is not considered as a
Default value, yes. Okay, if you want to use it,
no, if
see, thing is,
it's
mhm,
0, then it's
right,
giving an error message. Right?
yes, it will not be used as this one. And here you can see this child dependent. It is giving the same output, but we have used the what is that prompts and filters prompt option instead of hard coding the values. This is how we add the prompts, and by using this feature instead of hard coding the values, we can add the prompts. So whenever there is a requirement which frequently change the values that we use in filters, by using these prompts you can what is that avoid editing the report definition whenever there is a change in the value. And we have three more tabs. Okay, output. You might have observed, like if you want to display the report output in different formats, you can mention that here. The output type, current output type is table. If you want to display in chart, or if you want to display in another option, so that you will mention here how you would like to display the report output. You can mention those details here. And guys, this we will discuss whenever we have free time, because coming to the integration we focus more on how to implement the logics. Okay, so the output and some other options we will discuss whenever we have the some free time, additional time. Okay, remember that. But meanwhile, if you want, you can explore on your own. Okay, I will share a document. It will contain this charting and other options. You can explore on your own. And I would like to spend some time on share and advanced tab. Share. So we can share the advanced report. Unlike simple reports, we can share the advanced report. First point. And whenever you create the report, by default, you are the report owner. By default, you are the report owner. And until you share the report with others we cannot view the report definition. Others, they cannot view the reports. If you observe, there is a change in the user account. We had a issue with the previous user, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for some of the reports that I have created earlier. So I'm going to some of the reports that I have created earlier. Can you see this? The report exists in the tenant, but I cannot see because David Cooper is the report owner, and he or she, they haven't shared with us, so we cannot access those reports. Okay, and what I have done is whenever the new account is available, before unlocking what is that, before disabling that David Cooper, I have moved those reports to this new user JBanks. That's why we are able to see those reports. By default, you are the report owner. Until you share the report with others, they cannot see. And if you want to transfer the ownership, you can go to the custom report and transfer ownership. And here, David C. If you click on OK, then David Cooper will become the report owner, and you cannot access this report. You cannot access that report if you transfer the ownership. Okay, discard. But instead of transferring the ownership, what you want to do is you want to just share the report with others. Custom report and edit. What you want to do is you want to just share the report with others. You can come here and you can use this option, share with all authorized users, share with specific authorized users. David Cooper. So now we are sharing the report with David Cooper. So if the David Cooper has this access, like if the David Cooper has the report writer access, then he or she can update this report if they have the access. Otherwise they can run the report. As we are sharing the report, they can view the report definition and they can run the report. Okay, this is how you can share the report definition report with others. And finally, come to advanced tab. Guys, give me a second, please. So advanced tab. Here you can see some advanced option. You will see a lot of options here. Okay, see, enable preferred currency. See, second line when the same cell and the report. So you can read the documentation, because mostly in this tab, mostly we use two options. One is this web services option and temporary report. So as I have been mentioning, if you want to call any report from an integration, that should be enabled as a web service. And how you can do that? You can do it at two places. One is whenever you try to create a report. One second. This is the option, right? So whenever you try to create a report, in the first screen it will show you, when you select the report type as advanced, it will show you that option. Do you want to enable as a web service? Now it is a simple report. When I select advanced, can you see? Do you want to enable this as a web service? This is place one. And if you haven't enabled that, you can go to the advanced tab, and here you can enable that as a web service. Enable as a web service. Select this. Whenever you select this one, it will display the web service, API version and namespace. Ignore these two as of now. We will discuss during EIB outbound. Now we have enabled this report as a web service, so we can call this from an integration. And next option, temporary report. So whenever you create the report, you can mark them as temporary. So if you mark them as temporary, the report definition will be deleted by default after 10 days or 8 days, automatically deleted by the system on deletion date. Okay, by default, let me select simple report. See, if it is a temporary report, by default the report definition will be deleted after 7 days. Usually we use this feature to create some, let's say you are doing some investigation, and as part of that you want to create a report, and you don't need this after this investigation. So instead of wasting the resources, you can mark it as a temporary report. By default it will be deleted after 7 days. If it is a simple report, you cannot extend that. If you mark it as temporary report, it will be deleted after 7 days if it is a simple report. But if it is an advanced report, you can change that period. Instead of this, you can change it to the some other date. So the report definition will be deleted on August 1st. If you want to create as a permanent report, just uncheck this one. It will become the permanent report. And click on OK. And guys, I will enable this report as a web service during EIB outbound. Okay, we need some additional discussion on this, so I will enable that at that time. So I'm marking this as I'm unchecking this, so this will not be enabled as a web service, but I have removed the temporary report option, so the report definition will be available. It will not be deleted after 7 days or mentioned time. So these are the different options we have in creating the custom report. And one more is, see, let's go and see the different options that we have. This is to edit the report, copy. Let's say this is the report I have created. Now what you want to do is you want to practice something. You want to practice filter condition and sub filter. So at that time, instead of creating the report from the scratch, you can copy this and you can save it as a new name and start using that. And maintain Excel template, again it's UI related option. So whenever we discuss output options, we can discuss this. Run, if you want to run the report, you can run this. I will explain. Test, if you click on this, it will run the report and it will read first 10 records. Transfer ownership, as I mentioned, if you want to transfer the ownership to another worker, you can use this. And translate, I never use. Okay, so I have to read the what is that, workday notes. So I will check this option. Okay, and delete means, right, it will be deleted. And audits, if you want to create any, like if you want to see who made the changes at what time, like basically audit reports, this will be covered as part of functional, and Kumar will explain how to run the audit reports and all those. Calculated fields for report, we will discuss during the calculated field option, this one. And favorite, if you want to add this report as a favorite, you can add this. But guys, I never use the functional related options. So the report, what is that, the document which I will share, it contains the information about these functional related options also. If you are not clear about any, you can ask me or you can ask Kumar. Okay, integration IDs, I will discuss about the IDs during integration topics. Layout, again it's a UI related. And reporting, this called contextual reporting, but wait for some time, I will show you this. Solution means if you want to move this report to another tenant, we use solution option. But as I mentioned, so far most of the people, they are migrating the code between the tenants manually. Okay, these options we will see later during the iLoads. At that time we will discuss about these options. And web service, we use this option after enabling the report as a web service. We will discuss about this during EIB outbound. Because
Yeah, Ishwar.
Mhm.
So you said, to move this one instant to another instant, we will export this report to one Excel or something XML, then we will upload it in another instant.
that we will see, because what is the exact process and why generally we don't use, why people are using manual, we will have that discussion later. Yes, any other queries related to the reports? Otherwise, I will, if you don't have any, I will stop the recording and we can have the general discussion. Okay, let me stop the recording.